Right. It looks like kind of a quiet week here. I added one thing to the other pad, which is just a note about Paul's disk rescan feature. We talked about it before as a possible replacement for the Ceph volume inventory stuff. Um, so there is now actually like a pull request open. I think it's been open for a while, but I haven't even looked at it myself. Um, on that stuff, just if people want to take a look, giving some direct feedback on there, and we might talk about it next week. There's some interesting feedback or whatever. I know a lot of the problems people had with it before were about maybe why we're moving out of containers or why it can't be in set volume. Or I guess it was sort of the same problem because I think one of the main reasons it's not going to be in set volume is because you run set volume in the container. Um, I know that there's already discussion about that a little bit on there. If you're interested in that, but we'll probably bring it up next week. That's the only topic we actually have on there. I think it's going to be a bit more and stuff next week to talk about. This last week's been sort of quiet. Um, Romana, since you're here, do you want to give an update on the proof of concept work for the HNFS stuff for OpenStack?
Yeah, so Francisco mainly worked on it, so he was able to uh, uh, get it to work, as in basically manually copy over the scripts from an existing NFS service deployed by Ceph and then edit it and have not run the ingress service, but instead write up keep alive config manually, uh, and then have Ganesha bind to it, and we were able to get that to work. And he had some code changes. Francisco had some code changes in Ceph to do it. So I've asked him to share the Google Doc where we have documented these steps, and we'll clean that up and link that to the tracker ticket. So there's just one Ganesha instance that was manually deployed and manually run keep alive D and keep alive D attached to that. The Ganesha getting bound to that keep alive D IP.
Right. Sounds good. Then. Glad that it's actually working. If you guys got a proof of concept working, then we should be able to implement it in CephADM. Be too bad. I'll look forward to seeing that doc and what's in it. Maybe that'll be something else we'll talk about next week once it's cleaned up. I had a chance to look at it a little bit. I want to move forward with that work.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, we'll do that.
That's a note about that. That was kind of all we had for this week. I know, John, you are going to start looking at the FADM refactoring stuff. The work Mike was taking. You're taking that over, but I assume you haven't had a chance really to look at it yet, given that just sort of started yesterday.
Correct. I was reading the build.sh script that Mike mentioned as kind of unpleasant, unpythonic, and I was just saying to myself, oh, instead of calling Python into zipapp's a module. We can write our own build.py that calls the zipapp function, and instead of doing a bunch of string manipulation and other goofy stuff in shell, just bring it all into Python. I'm assuming that's what he was thinking. So I was going to prototype that, but I first need to kind of pull the branch locally, run what's there, and just kind of get a feel for the workflow that the PR is implementing. And yes, I haven't done anything practical other than skim the code, right, so far.
Yeah, and it was like just yesterday, I think, where you started looking at that.
Yeah, and I'm in the middle of a Go Ceph release cycle, so later this afternoon, that's what I need to do. So I don't have time for it today either.
All right. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we really have much to talk about this week. A lot of things are just sort of starting up, or are getting to a point where there would maybe be some discussion. But right now, there's a lot of interim things.
I added a new point. I just remembered it's from, I think it was added by Ernesto last week. It's basically a request to add some support for balanced static placement. Yeah, it's not urgent, I think, but something that at some point probably we have to look into to see if we can give it some solution.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this was just like the default. If like we're just using like the count-based placement, and we're doing it right now. I don't think Sosa's would be random, but I think it just does the first host every time.
Yeah.
And we just want it to not be random or as evenly distributed randomly,
Yeah.
sort of.
So right now, if you just put the count placement, we put all the daemons in the same hosts, causing hotspot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not super high priority just because I think people who have big proper clusters don't use the count option very much.
To use the labels, you mean?
Yeah. Because as outside of like our other HANFS deployment, the one with the HA proxy, where you might want the extra hosts for the failover, so you would use like a count that's lower than that number.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, I think in like an actual production system, they're going to want to say like, I want the demons here. I don't just want like 2 anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is still something that would be nice to do. I've noticed that if you when you set that up, you do get everything on the first host. I think part of that issue was just with the fact that when you're bootstrapping, it puts everything on that first host, and then it doesn't want to move things. It's going to always prefer the host that things are already on. Um, so I am sort of interested in how we're going to work with that aspect of it. Like, how much do we want to actually move demons from that initial host to other ones based on the sort of hashing we do here?
Yeah.
Because if we don't move anything, then technically we'd still have a hotspot the first host, but I'm not sure if that's really the case he's concerned about, or if it's more about later on if we do something else.
I had some discussion with him, and I think he had some practical use case when they after some installation they end up with the demons in the first host, and they have to go manually and move them.
Yeah. And
Probably,
I'm kind of wondering how much of it is just based on their demons got put there immediately because that's the first host in the cluster, and how much of that is actually just based on how our count placement works. Because if it is really just the fact that it's the first host and they get put there and then we don't want to move them, then I'm not sure if the static placement would fix their use case in particular, unless we want to actually move the demons whenever a host is added, if the static placement sort of changes, but that's also something we really don't want to be doing, moving demons all the time whenever we add a host. So we'd have to sort of balance that a little bit.
Yeah.
So it might be a bit tricky for that case.
I can double check with Ernesto and see what was the case when they ended up with this situation and what could we do.
Yeah, I'm just concerned. If there's any case besides the one where you're in first bootstrapping and adding the host, then it should fix it. If it is that case, then it's a bit trickier because we have to make that balance in between how much we're going to actually move things around.
Yeah.
So I'll get more info from him.
Yeah, I'll try.
All right, cool. Yeah, if you ask him about that stuff and get a bit more clarity on the exact use case they want solved, then they could maybe help do that. We could even include it in the this tracker issue.
Yeah, in the tracker, we can update tracker with new information.
Yeah, that would be good. Okay. Is there anything else? Any other topics anyone has for this week? Otherwise, I'm fine just waiting for next week and we can have.
As part of the ongoing efforts for the security feature. There were some. Actually, there are some daemons where the TLS and SSL feature is marked as experimental. So I reached out the developers of these daemons, and they basically told me that the features is operational, but probably at some point in the future they may have some changes. But from point of view of security, it should be okay.
Okay. The one thing we do is because we specify what images we're using, we can sort of decide what version we're going to have by default. And because we want to default to this thing being off in general anyway, it might be okay to still go forward with it. And then we just have to be careful if we ever change our default monitoring stack images. We'd have to, I guess, update this feature at the same time. So I don't think it necessarily needs to block us doing this at all, but it's just to be a bit more careful with our versioning, what versions we're using for monitoring stack daemons if we're going to do something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe even a warning when I don't remember how it's working, like how you turn it on. Maybe a warning if it's the command or something.
Right now, as I'm going with the implementation, right now it's just putting a variable to true or to false. You enable or disable the feature. But I think probably in real deployment, we should put it more explicit instead of just having like putting one variable, changing the whole stack to other options. So to have the user more aware of the effects, what is he doing, you know. Because right now it just changed the configuration variable and everything is restarted and reconfigured to start using SSL and TLS.
Yeah. And again, that's okay for like an experimental feature at the beginning.
Yeah.
Then we'll try to work on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's something we'll have to watch out for, but I don't think it should hopefully block anything for now. As long as again, we're careful that the versions that we have by default for the monitoring stack daemons are ones that have the experimental feature in the way that testing it.
Yeah.
Right. That's fine. It's something good to be aware of, I guess. All right. Any other topics, I guess?
Nothing more from my side, at least.
Okay. I'll try to add something in the other pad, unless you want to do it, Rido, about the stuff you were just talking about, this SSL with the monitoring stack. Other than that, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
We can.
I will put note. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you. And then other than that, I think we can sort of call it here, and I think there'll be a bit more to talk about next week. I want to bring up the RDW stuff, RDW multi-site stuff next week as well. Yeah, I think we can end here, and I'll see you all next week.
Great.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye. Thank you.